Hello and welcome back to Serious About Rugby League's podcast. This week we're going to go through the greatest coaches of all time. So we're going to go through our top 5 list. Some of the coaches might not be on here that you're expecting, but I feel like we'll have a few surprises along the way. In 1996, Sean McRae won the Super League with St Helens, and then all the way up to 2018, Sean Wayne won the Super League with Wigan. And we're going to cover as many as we can that coached in that time period. But we're going to go straight in at number 5 in our top 5 list, who is the 2018 winner, and maybe a bit lower than people would expect, Sean Wayne, who was a coach of Wigan from 2011 to 2018.
Well, yeah, I'll start on that one. I think he's a strange one, Sean Wayne, because he's a little bit similar to Brian McDermott in the fact that I think he actually got quite a bit of stick from Wigan fans, albeit the same Wigan fans are now probably wanting him back, because they only won one League Leaders Shield, and that's the thing about Rugby League, and especially Super League over the last, decade. We've had a lot of winners who haven't actually finished it in the top 2. So throughout the season, we've had coaches who've gone on to win the Grand Final who've actually been getting stick from their own fans throughout that season, and Sean Wayne was one of them, but I think he's always been a big game coach, Sean Wayne. Before Wayne Bennett got the England job, I were an advocate for him getting the England job because in one-off games, he knows how to get his players pumped up, and he were great at that with Wigan. Hence why they won 3 Grand Finals, they won Challenge Cups. I think he's just a great motivator, a great coach, and that's why he's got to be on the list. And if I'm honest, I don't think it'll be long before he's back at Wigan. I've just got a feeling that we might be seeing him a lot sooner than a lot of other people are expecting.
We'll put it this way, Ben. I mean, he certainly has the passion for the game because, I mean, different sport here, but I mean, with what he displayed in passion, he puts Darts' Gerwyn Price to shame, doesn't he? So,
yeah.
I mean, the way he always cheers every time that they get a win, and I'll give him that. I mean, and he's a Wigan lad, and that's something in a way that the Super League needs more. Okay, Justin Albrecht's an outsider and he's topping the league with Saints at the minute. More of him later, of course, but yeah, I mean. But I'll be a yes man as well, Ben, I'll agree. Sean Wayne, number 5, and he could have been even higher, but he has done a lot, and I think if he came back, I mean, he'd probably win even more silverware. Wouldn't surprise me at all.
He became a serial winner, didn't it, at the end of the day, and people know that. I got the years wrong. It's 2012, it was his first season in charge. But he took over from Michael Maguire. And I think the thing is, and this is probably why he's not as high on the list, is Michael Maguire came into Wigan in 2010, obviously off the back of Wigan struggling for a number of years, and sort of rejuvenated the team. He set up a structure that's still used at the Wigan club today. He obviously brought that defensive sort of wrestle tackle over to Super League as well, which obviously helped Wigan dominate in certain areas, which is why Wigan became the team they did. I think Sean Wayne took that technique and perfected it, which is why Wigan became serial winners in big games. Maybe his win rate, obviously it doesn't reflect that, is somewhere in the mid 60%. But as you said, they didn't finish top of the league every year, Wigan. But they were always there or thereabouts come the end of the season, other than the one 2017 season where they struggled to get up there. I think Sean Wayne learned that because in 2012 was the season he finished top of the league.
Yeah.
And then they lost in the semi-final to St Helens.
I think
that's a harsh one.
I think it might have been Leeds, that one.
Was it 2012?
It was the club called the 2012 one, mate.
Okay, it might have been Leeds.
Sorry.
It might have been. I'm almost. We'll have to check that one up later, actually.
Yeah.
I think it might have been same. It might have been Leeds. Either way, but he lost in the semi-final to the season he finished top of the league, and that was always his aim all year, to be consistent, and then they lost the semi-final, which obviously cost some silverware at the end of the year, and I think he learned from that. He didn't win the League Leaders Shield again in his time, but then he went on to win 3 Grand Finals, and then obviously the World Cup Challenge with the win against Cronulla, which was nobody expected at the time, which is a massive win. I think it's a good way to start this list. I think there's other candidates that are probably a bit more consistent and brought maybe slightly better styles to the league over the course of the years.
Yeah.
But Sean Wayne was a great coach for a number of years for Wigan.
Just on that, I think there's definitely something in what you said there, because he played the competition. Did Sean Wayne, like I said, when he first won the League Leaders Shield, he was devastated when they went out in the semi-final. But then I think he come to realise that his players had actually burnt out. He'd actually pushed them that hard in some regular season games, and then over the years, you saw them resting players. A lot of players were injured. You saw Sean O'Loughlin rolled out for the big games. That's
the big one, isn't it? Sean O'Loughlin, because the year after was the 2013 double at Wigan, where Sean O'Loughlin played in the Challenge Cup final and then didn't play again until the Grand Final.
Yeah.
And people are commenting on Adrian Lamb's management of Sean O'Loughlin this season. But I feel like Sean Wayne knew what he was doing with Sean O'Loughlin, which is why he came back for the big games and ultimately probably why Wigan won those big games.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a good way to start our list, and that is our 5th place choice. So we'll move on to 4th. This guy won silverware at 2 different clubs. Talking, of course, about Tony Smith, who coached for Leeds in the noughties and then obviously moved over to Warrington and maybe started the Warrington revival. The Warrington that we know now was obviously started with Tony Smith in 2009.
Yeah, well, I'm in agreement with that as well, because I mean, Smith, I think it was around about that time as well. It was in the late noughties, the mid to late noughties, that he was given the England Great Britain job as well. Obviously coached in the 08 World Cup, he didn't go that well. He had a good start before that though, because if I remember correctly, he actually, as international, we'll come on to this first, he won his first 7 games as international coach, which included that 3-0 series win over New Zealand in 07, so he started well. I mean, and obviously that was just after the way Leeds famously shocked St Helens in that grand final. I think it was something like 33 points to 6. I mean, it was an annihilation. So, and that was the first of 3. So, for the other 2, Brian McLennan came in, and you could see he inherited that team, but it was Tony Smith who kicked that off, you could say. I mean, even in 2004, he set a Super League record with Leeds, didn't he? 50 points, that was then a Super League record as well. I mean, Leeds were nigh on unbeatable. They only lost 2 games, I think, that year as well. So, yeah, I'm in agreement with that. I mean, he's been a controversial figure over the years, but with what he did at Leeds, he won them silverware, I mean, he won them 2 grand finals, and he arguably kicked off their golden era. Then he did it with Warrington, 3 Wembley wins as well. I mean, okay, they've not won at Wembley since, sorry Warrington fans, but still. But all the same, he managed to get them kicked off, and even then, he still guided Warrington to a couple more finals in the years since. So I'm in agreement with that. I mean, he did really well.
Yeah, I just think, obviously, talk about his stint at Leeds. He changed them from contenders to winners. That's what he did, and I think that's why he's rated so highly, especially among Leeds fans. But just on his time at Warrington, obviously, he went in there. Probably spent a bit too long at Warrington, if anything. He was there for more than 8 years, and I think by the end of it, a lot of the fans were kind of wanting a change, wanting a fresh start. I mean, that's probably proven now to be the right decision, but when he took over at Warrington, they were actually bottom of the league. Like, he took over there, and they were, like, down in the dumps. They're fans who have always wanted them to be at the top. He took them there. He was the man that got them there, and I don't think he gets the recognition he deserves for that, because... yeah, like I said, I remember his first game in charge, funnily enough, was against Leeds, and Warren had been getting hammered, and as soon as he went in there, he got them organised, got them playing a good style of rugby, and he got them up the league, and yeah, like I said, I don't think he gets the recognition he deserves for the job he did at Warrington.
Well, I mean, even in that 09 season, when he was first, yeah, okay, Warrington, they finished as low as 10th, but they still won at Wembley, and even then, to go from 10th, and then I think next year, they finished, 2nd or 3rd in 2010. I mean, okay, they didn't get to the grand final, but I mean, they pushed it close to Warrington, and they really did. They improved, didn't they? Okay, they had that. They didn't go too well in the playoffs. They had that defeat against Huddersfield at home, if I remember correctly, on the route to Old Trafford that year. But the fact is, he still got them going, and then in 2011, under him as well, he was given more time to improve, and they finished top, scored over 1,000 points. And it still bewilders me today how they didn't end up winning it, although your beloved Leeds, Ben, they stopped him in the club core round, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
so,
can't forget that.
Well, I bet you can't.
I think the difference between, obviously, Sean Wayne, who we spoke about, and Tony Smith, is that Tony Smith was the complete opposite, maybe, of Sean Wayne, in that he was a serial winner. He wanted his team to be the best all year round, no matter who they were playing, when they were playing.
Yeah.
He wanted to win convincingly at every single ground he played on. Maybe for Warrington cost them a couple of grand final titles, especially the 2012-13, where they were really at their best, they were really at their height, and they couldn't quite get over the line in two good games, and could have gone either way realistically, and they just didn't fall for Warrington those years. But along with that, he did win a World Cup challenge at Leeds, which is another to be coach a World Cup challenge in the Super League from the mid-noughties onwards is an achievement in itself, because obviously the domination and have had in that competition. Tony Smith's got one of those under his belt, and that says a lot for the man. And I feel like, as you said, at Warrington maybe he's underrated a little bit. People obviously expected him to win stuff at Leeds, because Leeds were always there or thereabouts. When he went to Warrington, nobody really remembers the Warrington that was before Tony Smith. We all just remember the Warrington that is now, and the one that's always there challenging there or thereabouts. And you mentioned the 2010 season where realistically they were beaten out by two teams that had beaten people out all season, and that's the only reason they didn't make the final, which isn't always the worst thing, and it set them up for a number of years where they were going to compete, and they still compete to this day. I think is worthy to have been number 4, if not maybe a bit too low with the quality, I'm sure, because we're going to move on to number 3, who we had discussions about this before we started, and we decided on our top 5 before we started, and there was some deliberation as to where Tony Smith goes in this list. Obviously his time at Leeds was very good, but he never won the title at Warrington, which we discussed maybe Sean Wayne should be above him because of that. And then the guy that's third maybe snuck just ahead of him because of his league title wins, and that is Brian McDermott. Recently moved to Toronto, but Leeds coach for a number of years, won 4 grand finals along the way.
Well, on this list he's actually won the most trophies. I think just about, probably close between him and the top 2, but the reason Brian McDermott's probably not higher is, like you say, similar to Sean Wayne, he played the competition really, albeit I don't think he intended to as much as Sean Wayne. I think Leeds actually struggled a lot in even the years they won the grand final. Obviously finished 5th twice, and on this list the 2 people who are actually below him have got win percentage rates of 68%, both Tony Smith and Sean Wayne, and Brian McDermott's is down at 61%, and that is because of those seasons where they finished 5th in the league, and all the Rhinos fans famously shouting McDermott out. It almost became a little bit of a lot of memes were made about that. But then at the end of the season, he basically shut up his own fans by winning the title for them, and all was forgotten up until the start of the next season when they started to struggle again. Obviously he inherited an unbelievable team, Sinfield, Maguire, Borough, the golden generation, but to coach that group of players, such big personalities, you needed to be a big personality yourself, and Brian McDermott was that. I think his selections perhaps caused a bit of controversy with the Rhinos fans. Obviously Rob Borough became a hooker, spent a lot of time on the bench. Kevin Sinfield went from loose forward to standoff, became an out and out standoff, but he had a strong will to make those decisions, and at the end of the day he won trophies. No matter what people say about him, he won trophies, and it might not have ended very well, but I think he'll always be remembered for the good times at Leeds and the treble in 2015. And people might argue he should be higher, people might argue he should be lower. I think he's probably about right where he is. Similar to Sean Wayne, a big game coach, winning the big games, getting his team up for the big games, and defying the odds really, because that's what he was good at. And when Leeds finished 5th, people would write him off, famously Phil Clark, and numerous other pundits had not give Leeds a chance, and yet they prove them all wrong, and Brian McDermott was a master at that.
Well, also they felt the wrath of Kevin Sinfield for that famous grand final speech, because, how did he end it with it, Ben? To all those people that wrote this team off, tonight's for you, thank you. Yeah. That's what he did famously that night as well, and rightfully so, because, the fact is, they really did turn on the Star Leeds. I think the 2011 one, they opened up with a playoff thrashing of, of Hull FC, so I'll even bring that into the fray here. But no, they played really well that night, and they just couldn't stop gathering the momentum from there. Then later in that, they famously beat Warrington in the club call round, albeit from a still debated penalty that Steve Ganson gave today, where Sinfield edged Leeds ahead, and they held on.
James Child famously came on the pitch, didn't he? He gave an offside. Never seen that before, but
and then even in the grand final, when Saints even led in that game 16-8, everyone thought Saints are going to steamroller them now, but no. McDermott, he must have said something, because unless he gave a half-time message thinking if we go behind, you never know what could happen. And then from 60 minutes onwards, I think it was 63 minutes, it was still that score, and Leeds all of a sudden 24 points at Old Trafford as well in that stage. It was incredible, because it looks very difficult to score there. That's why some of the last grand finals have been low-scoring affairs, because it can rain, the pitch is wet anyway at Old Trafford, so it is a bit harder to play on as well. But for them to do that year, it it was incredible in itself, and McDermott as coach, I mean, and then to even back that up in 2012 as well, it was incredible too. I mean, I think they were heavily written off in the grand final again because they played Warrington, who finished second, and Warrington battered St Helens in the semi-final by nearly 20 points. For them to do that against them, I mean, you got to give Leeds their dues and McDermott that. Okay, they went then 2 years without winning a grand final, but they still beat Cass, and then they famously in the treble, recording record wins over Hull KR as well, didn't they? So
I think it's just playing when it mattered. They just played the best rugby when it mattered. They timed the best form at the right stage of the season, and for Leeds' 8 grand final wins, they've only won 3 League Leaders' Shields. Brian McDermott only won 1, so they've actually consistently throughout the season they've never really been the best team. They've just played when it mattered, and obviously the famous chant "We'll win it from 5th." Could happen again this season if they're going to run.
Yeah, well, Leeds fans can up, guys.
I think the thing about McDermott, and obviously you mentioned the win rates of the other two, that with this about 68%. Tony Smith when he was at Leeds was a bit higher, but you've got to take into consideration Brian McDermott had 2 Leeds teams that finished outside of a top 8 playoffs. This is obviously this is when the middles came in. So to finish in the bottom 4 and still have a win rate over 60% means that you were winning games. One time or another you were winning games consistently.
Yeah.
And as you said, McDermott made the big decisions to move Sinfield from 13 to 6. Obviously we mentioned it in the podcast last week about whether Sinfield is considered a 13 because he made most of the big games were when he was at 6, and McDermott made that decision, and it was that treble winning season that Sinfield played most of his games in the halves, and Burrow came off the bench at 9, and it obviously made a massive difference because they went on to win all 3 domestic titles, and that's the kind of decisions you can't really argue with. And maybe at the time you're thinking, what's he doing? But now the proof's in the pudding sort of thing. They went on to win three trophies that year, and he's got a collection of trophies to go with it. Yeah. So Brian McDermott, obviously. Maybe the style of play isn't as attractive as maybe Tony Smith's style of play, but for the trophies that he's won over the time that he was at Leeds, along with the World Club Challenge, which every single one of our coaches has won, McDermott is probably rightly and fairly at number 3 in our list.
Yeah.
So we'll move on to number 2, and our number 2 choice is actually somebody who spent, out of the coaches in our top 5, he spent the least amount of years in the Super League. But probably had the biggest impact in that time. I think it's fair enough to say that. Maybe unfortunate not to get the top spot.
Yeah.
Saints fans, one for you guys. Daniel Anderson is our number 2 spot, who won 9 trophies in 4 years at Saints. That's a remarkable turnover.
And arguably should have been more, really.
Yeah.
Arguably, they had. Well, he were there for 4 years and won League Leaders' Shield all 4 years. They were the best team in the league all the time he were there.
It's kind of funny that he's not top of the list because I don't think he knows anything else, does he, apart from finishing top.
Well,
he's not top of our list.
And then obviously we've discussed those win rates. He's 74% win rate, and obviously we talked about the 2007-8 grand finals where Leeds beat Saints. So Saints were top those 2 years and probably unfortunate not to perform on the big stage and win the grand finals as well. But I mean, he won 3 Challenge Cups for the 4 years he was there. Like you say, he's won a World Club Challenge. It was just, it was a real dominant spell for Saints, albeit without the grand finals they probably deserved. He inherited a good squad. You're thinking around that period, looking at Jamie Lyon, and then you think of Kieran Cunningham. You've got James Robin, Sean Long, Paul Sculthorpe. That's the reason why they won so many trophies. But again, like I said with Brian McDermott, with those big names, those big players, you need a coach that can handle them, and he did. And his time there was just an era of dominance. I
think a lot of people will question us putting him at 2. I think it was a brave choice, and considering the grand finals, obviously we're talking. When we made this list, we're talking a lot about the coaches that have won trophies a lot and won the best trophies at the right times. That's sort of how we've made the top 5, because I think there's a lot of great coaches that haven't coached championship winning teams.
Yeah.
And but in this scenario, we had to take that into account. And Daniel Anderson, obviously only winning 1 grand final, he didn't win the other 3 that they finished top of the league. Maybe a bit of a controversial choice to be up there at second, but I think the way that Saints played their rugby in that period of time, they were almost impossible to touch. This obviously, Daniel Anderson was the coach for the famous 75-0 victory that I want to forget, but Saints fans will always remember. And somebody had to lead that team around the park, and Daniel Anderson, the way that he transformed the team that maybe was not quite hitting the heights that they should have been hitting with the personnel they had there, and made them into this formidable outfit that just were always going to finish top and were always going to cause you problems.
Yeah. As I say, I mean, especially from when he came in, I mean, he consistently made them top of the league. Because I remember 2004, St Helens finished, I mean, albeit I'll say it as low as 5th place that year, and they went out in the playoffs at the first hurdle to Wigan. I even remember that year they even sustained thrashings themselves. I mean, Ben will bring Leeds into it. I mean, the year they finished top, Leeds beat them 17-0 if I remember correctly. Danny Maguire scored a hat-trick that night as well. So, I mean, that's why, I mean, it was... 2004 was a low point for St Helens. I mean, midway through 05, Ian Millwood departed.
Yeah.
So, and Anderson had to... It was quite a challenge because Anderson had to keep St Helens consistent. He had to really guide them back to the top, and he did just that. I mean... Okay, they only won the Shield in 05, but I mean, they were close to Old Trafford. I mean, Bradford struggled and only just beat them late on as well. And I'll say this, it took a very special semi-final performance from Hull FC to beat them in the Challenge Cup. That's the only reason why they stopped St Helens from getting there. Because I remember after that game when Richard Horne scored that try, Jamie Lyon was in tears behind the post. So,
yeah.
But even then, Anderson instilled that passion into them, that drive. And they kicked on from there, and that's how they became consistent and left the bad patch of 03-04 where they finished 4th and 5th and no trophy. Okay, well, they won the Challenge Cup in 04. I won't say no trophies, nearly slipped up there, but no. but in the league, 4th and 5th, I mean, they weren't challenging Old Trafford. They weren't anywhere near Bradford and Leeds, who contested the 04 and 05 grand finals respectively. And even in 03 when it was Bradford and Wigan, they just weren't close enough. I mean, sustaining playoff hidings like they were. So, but then Anderson changed all that, and therefore I do agree with his choice at 2.
And then obviously 2006, probably the greatest team in Super League history. That the treble-winning team. Nobody could get near them.
There's 3 teams we always talk about, and obviously we've already spoke about Brian McDermott's 2015 treble-winning team. I think St Helens were probably one-on-one personnel were probably a better team than that. You've got some of the legends of the game that played in that 2006 team, and players that we'll be talking about in 20-30 years time still. Some of the greatest all-round players you'll ever witness on a park playing in that St Helens team, and they were led by Daniel Anderson in a very, very important stage in St Helens sort of life, as they were sort of, as you say, we were sort of rebirthing from a couple of years of disappointment and became once again a dominant force within the Super League.
Yeah.
Right, well, that leaves us straight on to our top big pick, but we're going to leave you in a bit of suspense. we'll leave a bit of a pause, because whilst we're here, we may as well talk about some of the guys that didn't make our list, and even some of the guys that are currently coaching in Super League, who maybe make this list in the future. Other contenders we've not spoke about, obviously Millwall. Well, Millwall was a part of that Saints revival also. We spoke about Sean Wayne, but his predecessor Michael Maguire, the guy that brought in the systems that he sort of perfected, hasn't been mentioned. Obviously he was a grand final winner and a Challenge Cup winner with Wigan. Sean McRae, we mentioned at the start of the show, was the first ever winner of Super League, and this was back when you had to finish top to win it. So maybe you could argue probably the most difficult time to win the Super League, and McRae went out and did it in '96 after obviously years and years of Wigan dominance in the early '90s. McRae came out and stole the show with St Helens in '96. Nathan Brown was obviously great with Huddersfield and St Helens and did a lot for both sides. Brian McLaren, as you mentioned, with Leeds, was obviously a part of that McDermott era, taking from Smith to McDermott and leading Leeds through a couple of grand final victories. Any other fantastic picks for yourselves?
I maybe would have added John Keir to that. because of what he did with the Sheffield Eagles in against all the odds, and I'm sorry to say this, Sean, against Wigan at Wembley. Remember that dreaded final?
Luckily, I don't
Sorry,
remember
John.
I'm glad I weren't there.
But there's that one. I mean, and then what he did with Hull FC 2005 against the Leeds Rhinos. We'll leave his off-field issues with Kath Etherington off the record. I mean, we'll just leave it about what happened between them two.
And he's doing a fantastic job now.
Yeah, he is. Yeah,
he is. I mean, not only at Bradford as well. I mean, Bradford are looking playoff contenders in Championship, yeah, but different division, but still. And what I also did with Batley Bulldogs in 2016, he took him up to third place. Okay, they didn't fare too well in them qualifiers. I mean, they sustained some hidings, but to get them up to third place against the odds, I mean, they finished higher. Even the Featherstone joined them, but they finished up with Featherstone, Bradford, who they finished fifth, and then Bradford went on to a temporary liquidation after that. And even Halifax as well, all them three were highly fancied, and Batley came in and, they upset the apple cart, didn't they? So, and that was, you could say that was all down to Kia. Even with Wakefield survival in 06, and then he took them to the playoffs shortly after. So there's that as well, so I would have put Kia in there.
Yeah, I think John Keir's a good shot. I think what he's doing at Bradford is notable. And this is the toughest championship competition we've ever seen. So for somebody to lead a team like Bradford, obviously they had so many years of struggle, and put them in a position where the considerable chance for promotion, they're still in that fight, they're still well in that fight. So definitely a consideration for John Keir. Current Super League coaches, and there's some fantastic coaches in the league at the minute. I think we're blessed to have as many good coaches with so many different styles and adaptability. Which makes the league so interesting, because match for match you have to take into consideration the way teams are going to play.
Yeah.
And it's because of these coaches. Justin Holbrook at St Helens has done an amazing job since he came in. He's took the Saints team that were down and out after obviously a couple of tough years again. It's the same as Daniel Anderson. It's a couple of tough years for St Helens.
Yeah.
And Holbrook's come in and he's rejuvenated the team. He's sent them in a different direction. He's got them playing a different style of rugby. And all the top players, the likes of James Roby, the likes of Alex Walmsley, they've all come in and into this system and dominated, and that's why Saints look so good.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
Well, this is where Ben in his article, you were right to compare St Helens to be the Arsenal of rugby league, because before Holbrook came in, they consistently finished fourth place. Something Arsenal are known to do, aren't they? So, I mean, they did from 2015 to 17, didn't they? And then all of a sudden Holbrook comes in, shoots up back to top, similar to what Anderson did.
And I think Holbrook's learning the competition as well. Obviously, they won it by a mile last year, but then faltered and lost to Warrington in the semi-finals. You've seen this weekend just gone, he's rested players against Catalans. He's almost playing James Roby every other week. Yeah. A bit like the Sean O'Loughlin scenario. He's just going to roll him out in the big games, make sure he's fresh 100%. And yeah, I'll make a bold prediction. I think Justin Holbrook will be on this list if we do it in 5 years.
Yeah.
If he stays at
St Helens, obviously he's not snapped up by another side or an NRL side. If he stays at St Helens, I can't disagree with you. I think the way he coaches the game is magnificent. I think Steve Price is another one of those. Steve Price has been really, really good for Warrington in the way they move forward. Their shapes are a lot better this year. Obviously, with the addition of Blake Austin, which obviously was a fantastic signing for Warrington, he's been able to manipulate that team even more, which is why they're scoring so many tries. Josh Charnley was a massive acquisition in mid-season last season, and obviously they've got Gareth Widdop coming next year.
Yeah,
so Steve Price is doing a job to completely redevelop this team. And Warrington, it's always their year, but it actually looks like it might come under Steve Price, and Steve Price might be the guy that unlocks the padlock for Warrington. Other coaches that maybe haven't quite hit the dizzy heights quite yet. Obviously, Lee Radford has won the Challenge Cup with Hull a couple of times. Chris Chester's doing a fantastic job at Wakefield. Obviously, Chris Chester's took that Wakefield team from being the Wakefield we remember that finished second bottom every single season to the Wakefield we know now, who are going to be challenging for the top 5 as long as they possibly can, with some fantastic personnel in there. Then there's obviously Darryl Powell, who similar to Lee Radford, maybe hasn't hit the dizzy heights. He obviously made a grand final in 2017 Castleford, but Darryl Powell took that Castleford team, much like Chris Justice took the Wakefield team, from a position where they were struggling. Obviously they got relegated a number of years ago, and they've come back into the Super League, and Darryl Powell's been able to push them from that team that are down the bottom four, really into contender territory. Even with the lengthy injury list that we know they've got, they're still right up there challenging for the top 5, and they will be till the end of the season, I imagine.
Yeah.
That's just some of the talent we've got on show, and some of the talent we've missed out in this list. And obviously we can't mention everybody, but there've been some fantastic coaches in this competition over the years. So we're going to move on to our number 1 pick, and I think, like I said at the start, there might be some picks that not everybody's expecting. I think this might be one of them, because our number 1 pick is Brian Noble, who obviously won all of his trophies whilst he was at Bradford, but obviously then went on to coach Wigan in a relegation sort of survival campaign. And Brian Noble, during his time at Bradford, obviously you mentioned the Saints team as you consider the best team that's ever been. In my opinion, the 2003 team that Brian Noble coached at Bradford was the best team that's ever played in Super League. That's my opinion. I think Brian Noble brought that team together in a way that I don't think we've seen again, and I'll struggle if we'll see it ever again. That team was incredible. Obviously with Big Les on the wing, and young Jamie Peacock running through the middle. There were some fantastic players in that period of time that Brian Noble led, and he got 3 grand finals and no less than 3 World Club challenges to go along with it.
Well, yeah, I said earlier Brian McDermott's got the most trophies on this list. He actually hasn't. Brian Noble beats him by 1, and we talked about timing your run to the grand final and winning it and resting players through the season. Well, Brian Noble at Bradford actually did both. He won the League Leaders' Shield and won the grand final. He did that on a few occasions, and they were consistently the best team through the season, and they were also the best team in the big games. They were the best at both, and like you said, they were almost unbeatable at times. And yes, he inherited a good squad. I mean, you mentioned some of those players. Now that team is almost remembered by everyone, and I think probably remembered more since Bradford struggled and seen as the glory days, and perhaps by many the glory days of Super League, seeing Leslie Vinocola run down that wing. But yeah, I can't argue with it. Brian Noble, like you say, he went into Wigan afterwards, and I don't know whether Bradford would have had the fall they did if he'd have stayed. I don't know if he got out at the right time, but the time he was there, those 6 years were brilliant, weren't they? I mean, Bradford fans will want those days back as soon as possible, and I wouldn't rule out him going back there one day, which would be something.
It would be something special, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But I mean, we mentioned the 03 team. I would say maybe the 2005 team as well, even because the way that he was also the first coach to win a Super League grand final that wasn't in the top 2. He was the first coach to actually do that with a club. I mean, and that was an achievement in itself as well. I mean, they beat Saints in the semi-final. They gained revenge against Leeds at Old Trafford. Sorry, Ben, from the year before. But I mean, and that was rather impressive too. I mean, it stunned the whole of rugby league that in April of 06 that he went to Wigan, because I mean he was guarding Bradford towards the top again. I mean they just battered West Tigers in the World Club Challenge. Stuart Fielden was on for being best forward in the world at that moment, and then he joined him at Wigan, didn't he? So. Yeah. And unfortunately, then since then Bradford they never really recovered and never got back to them dizzy heights. But they do owe Noble to that. I mean, even just before I went, I think they created banners at a certain Huddersfield televised game begging him to stay as well, but it just wasn't enough. And then Bradford never really recovered because Steve McNamara came in, but he had the colossal job of maintaining that, and in the end it just couldn't be managed, could it? So yeah. I agree with Noble being top.
I think Noble top, and I think this is the reason why some people will disagree with it, is that obviously Bradford's downfall was immediately after Noble leaving. You might argue that some of what he did back in the background led to that demise. We'll never know that. All we know is what he did on the pitch, and he led that team. It's just, I still remember because I went to the 2003 grand final, and it was the first time I've been to a grand final. It was a big day out, and I just remember watching a Bradford team rip us to pieces, and it was like it was sport for them, watching us suffer. Like they were that good on the pitch, and it's Noble's that's credited to that. And whether his sort of achievements at Wigan were equally as good is arguable. Obviously, Wigan were struggling at the time and were lost by a long way, and then he came in and sort of changed the team and enabled Wigan to stay up. And then obviously Wigan then jumped up back into the playoffs a couple of years later, and it was Noble that led that team. They finished 4th in 2009, which was Noble's last year in charge. So he took that Wigan team to the next stage, and obviously Maguire came in and won the grand final, but without Noble being able to progress that team in the way that it did, maybe Wigan never don't come back. You know what I mean? Maybe they just become a mid-table team for a number of years. So you've got to look at both sides, and obviously we said that we're going to look at the trophies, and that's how we're sort of judging it. But Noble's done it both. He's done it at the bottom and he's done it at the top.
Yeah.
Which means that you, as a head coach, you can't really look at past him being the best.
Nope.
Yeah.
So that is our top 5 list. We want you guys to have a go. Comment your top 5. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and see you next time.
Watch every game of the NRL, plus the grand final and state of origin from anywhere outside Australia, New Zealand or the Pacific Islands. Go to watchnrl.com and take the footy with you.